Hi guys, it's Khaled here with my mustache, I think for one last time. So if you like it, enjoy one more ride. Um, Today I am gonna pick up where I left off in the very first video that I made uh, and take it to the next logical step. So in that very first video, to summarize really quickly, I said, hey, there is a socialist goal. And there is a leftist project that says that it's trying to accomplish the socialist goal. And if you actually look at what it's doing, it's not really serious. It can't accomplish it in any shape, way, or form. Okay? And I said the only thing to is to take the exit ramp, get off this track, a merry-go-round that's not going anywhere, but take the exit ramp and start from scratch. You can't transform or salvage like meaningful parts of the left and try to repurpose the project towards a more meaningful trajectory. So now I want to kind of like do the follow-up, and the follow-up is, what is the exit ramp? Like if I'm going to make my sales pitch, if I'm going to kind of expose my thinking about where this may go, and this is something that I've actually been thinking about over the past however many 8 weeks, right, since I made that video. Like, what is the alternative that I can convince myself, like be confident is a better, more meaningful trajectory, a more well thought out trajectory than the one that we're at right now. And to do this properly, I need to sort of share with you how I think about the world, especially this thing called a socialist project. And as I see it, we have this order in the world called capitalism. It's basically a set of initial conditions and a set of rules that is highly stable, where the conditions from day to day don't like to change, and the rules usually shape themselves to serve the people with more material resources. So the rules stay largely the same or continue to be in favor of people with power, and the initial conditions largely stay the same, or they trend a little bit towards people who already have a disproportionate amount of material resources. And capitalism just keeps it together. And the way that I understand something like this possibly happening, changing this, what's like a metastable system, really, this is too complex to survive. Holy shit, how does it keep it together? Crisis after crisis happens, and this shit stays here, right? It's surprising. It has a lot of sophisticated machinery in it, but it's very resilient. But we know that all these systems come to an end. They have to. At some point, a crisis is going to occur, something transformational in society, a new technology, an externality like a coronavirus, whatever it might be, that's going to come and shake the legitimacy of the system, strain it, pull those stitches apart to such a degree that the whole thing comes apart. What comes after that is something that we can try to influence, or we can just wait for. And the socialist project is a proposal that we want to try to influence the outcome of what happens there. But it's sort of an odd proposition to build a project around, because part of the project is a large unknown, right? If I was like, okay, I have to pull a plan together, then I have to have a realization that I have an event horizon that I can't see beyond, right? It's just a black hole and no light escapes from it. I don't know when this crisis is going to happen. I don't know its nature. I don't know its scale. And I don't know how much power I need on my end to influence the chaos that will almost necessarily occur, so that it settles down on a new point of stability that favors, honestly, my goal is favors a bigger group of people. This is the only thing I can. I don't think anybody can promise more than that. I think anybody making more promises than that is lying to you. Anybody trying to describe a utopian end to this project is deluded, right, given the complexity of the system. So I think the best we can do is try to create the biggest leap, right, the biggest step function from where we are right now in terms of who benefits the most and who is most exploited and extracted from, so that the balance is radically transformed. Okay? All the other details are beyond, right? We can't predict so much stuff, right? So the most we can hope for is optimize for that single equation. So this is how I see it happening. So if I want to put together a plan, or if I want to see a plan from a left or any kind of socialist project, I want to understand what they're doing about this event horizon, because that's the furthest anybody can plan. What do they think the conditions need to be at that point? What is the configuration, the political configuration that is most optimal, so that we can get to the other side, so that it looks in a way that's favorable to our objectives, or at least the objectives that I named for myself. So when I go and I look at the left, right? So that's the first place that I would look. I want a socialist outcome. I should go check with the socialists and see what they're planning to do. And the normal questions that one would ask are, like, what's the goal? What's at that event horizon? What's the plan to get there? And how do I know that the plan makes sense? Like, what's the logic? Can you explain to me how the plan works? And like, a legitimate question is, why is this project, by all accounts, just a dud? Why is it failing at the most basic skirmishes, when, like, this battle that's facing it is absurdly big, and it can't stop tripping over its own dick on the smallest shit, right? And you can say, hey, the left isn't losing, but let's be honest, right? Just even putting aside the electoral defeats of, like, Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, like, we're at this moment of massive crisis, Corona. Everybody's asking about the legitimacy of the system, or, like, people are starting to think about it. And in the political conscience of most people, most workers, the idea of worker solidarity, of a single shared interest, does not exist. There is no political unit that can do anything at this moment, and not even a hint of an idea that socialist leftists have managed to inject into the political consciousness. Like, it doesn't exist. It can't exert any power. So it's just an absolute shit show, right? So it is a failure. So those are the questions that I want to ask. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And why do we keep fucking up? And to those questions, as I've, like, just let them bounce around in my head, read articles, looked at what the leftists are saying, I summarized the response as, like, the Holy Trinity, which is moral rectitude, doing the work, and boundless optimism. And the first one, moral rectitude, is that the plan that the left has, as far as I can tell, is that at that moment of uncertainty, at that event horizon where nobody knows what's going to happen, all we know is that something is going to happen, the left thinks that the best thing to do is try to make workers good and morally righteous, right? They want to instill moral rectitude in the hearts and minds of workers. Like, putting aside the absurdity and of that posture, like how authoritarian it is, right? And basically what we're talking about is the political elite, or even, like, the professional class, The people with some power in society who have time to engage in politics, they've decided that their cultural and social sentiments are going to be the foundation of a new moral landscape. And that in order to achieve salvation, in order to deal with the moment of the apocalypse, of that event horizon, what workers need to do is be the best they can be based on the rules that the professional elite have come up with, right? The rules that are just based on their modes of etiquette, how they talk to each other, and all that stuff. Again, like, that's an absurd thing. That's an absurd posture for a popular political movement to take, to say that we need to assign values to our base, right? Treat them as subjects of our project, as opposed to trying to empower them and make them agents of their own political will, and find a way to distill their shared values and their shared interest in the most representative way possible. to have like a bunch of dorks that went to Princeton and Yale say the things that we learned in college and the things that we were taught at corporate HR seminars are morality itself, and salvation comes as a result of adopting that. So our project is really instilling these values in the hearts and souls of workers. That's the best way we get there. And the reason that people believe that is, there are multiple reasons. One of them, honestly, is that this is like, I use the Holy Trinity as a metaphor. I refer to them as the church left, and other people have, but this is sort of a religious sentiment. The meek shall inherit the earth. Power isn't about power is about goodness, right? This is what like Jesus preached to the villagers. The meek shall inherit the earth. It's like, don't worry about Caesar. Don't worry about the people with the spears, right? Just be good, and at the end of it, you're going to get rewarded. And I don't think the left, composed of a bunch of liberal arts majors, who love Harry Potter or whatever it is, conceive of outcomes with more complexity than that. It's all stories of good people winning great battles against evil, right? So all you have to do is purify yourself. So that logic resonates with them, and it makes sense. It legitimizes the silliness of their project in their own heads. It even legitimizes the authoritarian posture and this condescending posture that they take towards workers, right? We're going to teach them how to be good based on our values. Otherwise, they're not going to get to socialist heaven. And I talked about this in my last video where I talked about the perpetual virtue machine. But I don't know, these guys suck. Like the second thing that they also might believe, right? Not just like this end of days, just be good kind of thing. But they might believe that if you have shared values, then you can formulate strong bonds of solidarity, of the realization that you have a shared interest. And this is just a confusion on their part, because they see themselves, like this professional elite, they see themselves as a political unit that has shared interest, especially those on the left. And they think that emerges from their shared moral convictions, right? Like the stuff that they learned at the corporate HR seminars, at the universities, like all the stuff, all these experiences that they share, they think that because they have these values, they ended up having a shared sense of political unity. Of course, that is a reversal. Their shared material interest, their place in society, put them in the same basket where they got exposed to the same set of values. And they're not values really, they're just sentiments, social and cultural ones, that they've transformed into important moral positions with huge ramifications on the future of the world. So that's the first of the Holy Trinity, like that's the Father. moral rectitude. The second piece that the left kind of puts forth is doing the work. Okay, and this is like if you say, "Hey, what's the plan? Like, how are we planning to even get to where we're getting to, right? How are you going to achieve moral rectitude if that's the game? How are you going to achieve solidarity amongst workers? All this stuff." And the answer, and then like not just like what the plan, but why does the plan make sense? The answer to that is always go do the work. And what doing the work implies, or what they're suggesting, is go find any leftist, any person calling themselves a leftist, any person calling themselves a socialist, see whatever they're doing and replicate it. That's doing the work. It's like walking up to the church door and saying, "Hey, I see you guys doing all these things. Why do these things matter in terms of my salvation? What's the logic behind them? Why do I need to sing these hymns? Why do I need to take the communion? Why do I need to drink the wine? Why do I need to confess?" And so on and so forth. The answer to that is that their logic will reveal themselves by actually doing them. And so nobody explains to you what you're supposed to do. You just go stand next to the first person you see and pick up the same book that they have in their hand, and turn to the same page and start singing the hymns along with them. Just mimic what everybody else is doing. Just do the work. And soon enough, and this happens for most people, the logic does reveal itself. But it's just repetition, right? Your questions weren't answered, but now that you've done it enough, it seems to have its own its own logic. And this is how the left avoids actually interrogating what its plan is, by creating these artificial barriers to conversation and to discussion about what it is that the project is and how it's working, and all that stuff. Go do the work, earn your badge. And doing the work basically diffuses the conversation. The last piece of the puzzle, you have the Father, the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the Holy Spirit, right? It's faith. It's what I refer to as boundless optimism. If you go and you ask the left, "Hey, why are we losing?" They say, "We're not losing. We're winning. We have all these victories. We're winning the battle of ideas. Like, all these things are happening. This is bigger than Bernie. So even if Bernie lost, it still doesn't matter. This movement is bigger than Bernie, and it's still like emerging and becoming more powerful." Just demands for boundless optimism, because this is an article of faith, right? And not having boundless optimism is itself a sin, right? Not having faith is a failure, is a moral failure. So what they call pessimism, right, which is doubt, is bad and sinful. So you have to just adopt boundless optimism. So obviously, I don't view these answers to be satisfactory. Some might call them unfair, like my characterization is inaccurate. But this is the way I understand it. As I went around looking for the answers to those questions in the left, I found the Holy Trinity. So on the other side of that, it's like I had to come up with my own answers, because, again, like I don't see a place where a socialist project, a reasonable one, can emerge from. So you start going through these questions, like what is a reasonable goal to have for the kind of project timeline that I understand a socialist transformation to necessitate. The fact that there is this crisis, this edge of crisis that I can't see beyond. What is my state? What is the best possible state to be in at the edge of that crisis? Here, the only assumption that I can make is that the group of people who conceives of themselves as a political unit that has the most power, and power is a combination of many things, but the group of people that has a conceptualization of self as a political unit with the most power and the most ability to project a cohesive set of demands will get the most favorable outcomes out of the moment of crisis. If we end up going to, actually in both cases, even if the moment of crisis actually pulls us back to the point of stability, you can demand the most concessions by having the most power. But even if we go to a point of chaos and then in search for a new stable point, the ability to influence what the new stable point is also dependent on how strong and singular your conceptualization is of yourself politically and how much material power you have to actually influence events. And to my mind, like in the first video, I introduced this equation called populist people power or populist political power. That makes a little bit more sense. And basically, I said it's three things multiplied with each other: number of people, average material power, and average ideological commitment. Okay? So how many people who think of themselves as part of a single project are there, and how committed are they to that project, multiplied by the average material power that each person has. Okay? So you want to have the most amount of power, and I discussed what I meant by that in that video. So if you're curious, you can go back and watch it if you haven't already. So as I think about the landscape, the political landscape that exists, the most compelling group of people to organize politically that would maximize the values of those parameters is what's defined as the working class. Okay, people who have to basically sell their labor in the market to survive, more or less. If we think about just sheer numbers, right? Just sheer numbers, they are the most numerous. If we understand the elements of power, okay, within a society such as ours, okay, we understand that there are multiple variables. One, capital. Two, political will, right? We live in a democratic system, so if you can actually muster political will, you can make things happen. Three is, and this is huge, labor. None of the machinery of capital works without labor, as much as they pretend that it can, and they're working to eliminate it. It's still like pure, just unadulterated power exists in the fact that labor is controlled by workers. When it's all said and done, really. So the most convincing configuration for me to say, okay, what is my goal at the event horizon, is to get every single possible worker to conceive of themselves as part of a greater political whole with shared incentives, incentives that are best pursued as a political unit, and find ways for them to express their collective political will through mechanisms. I'm not sure what they are, but this is part of the great journey. And I want to be able to secure, and they're going to secure for themselves, right? The project relies on them securing for themselves increasing amounts of material power, so at moments of crisis, they can extract the most concessions. Okay, and again, that power comes in a bunch of different forms. So that's the first thing. That's my vision. It's not about moral rectitude. It's not about making them good. It's not about telling them what good is and that they're doing it all wrong. I'm not a clergy, right? This is not my role. They have an independent will. They have agency. They get to decide what's right and what's wrong, and I don't get to dictate what it is for them. And genuinely, if you don't approve of that, like this is one, obviously not the project for you, but moreover, I don't think there's any configuration of any project that can succeed that doesn't accept that as a basic fact, that we're working to empower workers, right? Our task is to empower workers to be able to express their political will as a single political unit. Like the fact that you want to build your project based on the ability to push your ideas down as opposed to gather people's ideas up is you're building the wrong fucking machine, you moron. Okay, so that's the first thing. That's my goal. Okay. Second thing is what's my plan and how do I get there? And why does my plan make sense? And here, just brutal honesty, right? I don't have a plan. Okay. But what I can tell you that there is no such thing right now as doing the work. Okay. Because the one thing that we should realize is that none of the institutions that we have through which we can do work are meaningful or effective at any level because none of them were thought out. All of them are borrowed from liberalism, a machine designed for the stability of the capitalist system. We don't have the right tools. Nobody's designed them. Nobody has thought about them in the shadow of what the goal is, right? With an eye towards the goal. And what ideas we do have are old and stagnant. So right now, this phase of the project is when we realize that the last version was a total disaster and it doesn't work and there's nothing that can be used. We're like, okay, back to the drawing board. We're going to go ahead and start writing this stuff out. Okay, what are the questions that we need to answer? What are the steps that we need to execute? So this is a process, and we have to recognize that this point in the process is about thinking, making a plan, asking questions, trying to figure out who and how we'll answer these questions, and then how we'll execute on whatever plans we manage to put together. We're in the thinking phase. I'll be honest. I don't have answers for you. But that in itself recommends a project, right? Or a mini little step, which is like starting to articulate these questions and figuring out who can help answer them, right? I don't know any of this stuff. Not a single anybody out there listening knows all this stuff, or even a small fraction of it. Right? This is a complex problem that requires a lot of people, their expertise, their time, and their effort in order to pull together. And we're starting from nothing, or not very much. And then the last thing is like, okay, why do we keep losing? Of course, I have my critique of the left. I've explained it over the past few videos, pointed to kind of like the structural defects, the ideological defects, the practices, whatever it is. But like what I can tell you is that a reasonable project, one that can hope to actually succeed, will never ever demand boundless optimism from its people. Okay? Optimism, hope is a betrayal of reason, right? It's what we escape to when we don't have confidence in something. Okay? So what I'm optimizing for is maximizing confidence. The question that I'm going to ask, or everybody needs to ask themselves in relation to this project as they participate in it or they talk to people about it, isn't are you a believer? Do you have faith in the afterlife? Do you have faith in socialist success? Do you believe that we're winning, that we're on our way? That's not the question. The question is, here is my process, here's my plan, here's my objective. I'm going to explain it to you in the best of my capability, or I'm going to look at it as carefully as possible and then ask the question to myself and to others, do I have confidence in this? Okay? That question is very distinct from blind optimism or boundless optimism in that it elicits like a feedback cycle. If you say, I don't have confidence in that plan, it's not a failure on your part that you don't have confidence in that plan. It's a critique that allows for discussion. What don't you have confidence in? Why not? All that stuff. So that's the basic difference in that fundamental question of like confidence towards the project. Why are we losing? Oh, you just need to believe. Like, it's not a reasonable posture. Okay. So that's the Holy Trinity. My road is like, what I'm offering is like a process, somewhat like its bones are somewhat scientific. It's, you're coming in, you admit that you're faced with a vast number of unknowns, but you look for processes that help you navigate these waters with some confidence. And this is what I'm going to try to do, honestly, hopefully with other people's participation, is to just think about these ideas and blurt them out. I'm always just genuinely curious what people think, what ideas people have. So if you have anything, please put it in the comments. And thank you for your time. See you next time.